Hello and welcome to Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Thanks for joining us. I'm New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. As State Comptroller, I serve as New York's Chief Financial Officer. Because New York City contributes so much to the state's economy, keeping an eye on its fiscal health is one of my top priorities. With my guests today, I'll be discussing the city's tourism industry, infrastructure, immigration, and many other important issues. My first guest, Assemblymember Carmen de la Rosa, was elected in 2016 to represent the 72nd Assembly District in Washington Heights and Inwood, where she grew up. She's since proven to be a fierce advocate for the rights of women and immigrants and the needs of the community she represents. Assemblymember de la Rosa, thank you so much for being here and joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
So you grew up in the neighborhood.
Yes.
You went to Fordham University.
I did.
And first in your immediate family to have that opportunity experience. You had a degree in political science and peace studies also, I read.
Absolutely.
And you went to work for some elected officials, working with Assemblymember Danny O'Donnell, a very dynamic member of the Assembly, Councilman Idanis Rodriguez, you were chief of staff. Great experience in terms of learning about issues in the neighborhood, and now you're on the other side.
Yes.
You're the elected official.
No.
How different has that experience been for you?
Well, it's been an amazing experience. First of all, I have to say that talk about two men who support women. Danny O'Donnell was a great boss. First job out of college. He took a chance on a kid, and it was great. And Idanis has always been a fighter for progressive New York City, and in my community has really been an icon as to what the progressive movement is. So I was blessed to have those opportunities, and now that I'm in the seat, you know, I'm raising my daughter in the community where I grew up, and I understand the needs because they're the needs of my neighbors, they're the needs of the people that I have known my entire life. And I love it, you know, to be able to bring my vision to reality, to be able to advocate for my community and be the voice that is in the center of the discussion of what is going on in Albany and how those policies affect working communities is a dream come true. I wake up every morning saying that I'm blessed. The good days and the bad days, I'm blessed.
And you just went through a challenging budget process.
Yes.
And I'm sure many of the priorities that you had were reflected in the debates that went on. You know, in terms of what you would identify as your key issues, what you're hearing from the community, how are we doing these days in terms of the state, through the budget or through legislation, addressing the priorities that you think your constituents want to see addressed? Well,
you know, I tend to think that I'm in the better chamber in the Assembly. I'm biased, of course. We have a great leader in Speaker Carl Heastie, and we've been able to do some really good legislation, but obviously because of what's going on in the Senate, it's been difficult to actually get laws passed. But I will tell you that in my community, the #1 issue is and has been housing. My district has one of the largest rent-regulated housing stocks in the entire state. About 71% of the units in my district are rent-regulated. Wow. And that in Manhattan, that's unheard of. So one of the things that has been a challenge and that is a priority for me every single day is to protect that affordable housing stock. This week, actually, the Assembly passed 9 pieces of legislation that protects tenants against harassment. You know, the rent regulation laws in Albany have always been an issue of contention. And we're doing our best to try and peel back some of the legislation that has been put in place that affects tenants, like vacancy decontrol and the bonuses that landlords get when the apartment becomes vacant. We want to make sure that the housing stock is preserved, that people stay in their homes, right? These are communities that are built by working class New Yorkers, people who came to this country like myself and my family, immigrants. You know, my father came here in the 70s and opened up a grocery store in the Bronx when no one wanted to be in the Bronx. And we settled in Washington Heights and we stayed there. And I believe that our communities deserve to stay where they've made homes. And so housing is definitely the #1 issue. Hand in hand with that, though, is unemployment. In my community, the unemployment rate is higher than the citywide average. And so we're working every day as investments are being made in our communities to make sure that we are gaining jobs for the people that are working and living in our community. If they have work, they can stay in their apartments. And so a Workforce One Center was created right in the heart of our community on 181st Street, and we've seen some good results. And as projects continue to develop in the community, we're pushing to make sure that we have prevailing wages and that those jobs make sense for the people who are living there.
Your family story and your own story of success as an immigrant family is certainly a New York story.
Absolutely.
And there's so many of those New York stories happening each and every day. You have emerged as the leader in the Assembly to continue to push for the DREAM Act, which gets another important issue of education, both K through 12 and higher education. Mm-hmm. It's been a point of contention between the Senate and the Assembly. But you know, for our viewers, why don't you give us an update? I mean, this is the issue that talks about giving access to financial aid to the children of undocumented families in our higher education system. And it's been a battle for many years. Many have thought we're long overdue to have it enacted. Other states, I always point to Texas having this opportunity. New York is behind a state like Texas.
Absolutely, and for those proud New Yorkers, New Jersey just did the right thing.
New Jersey did
just did the right thing.
That. Yeah, so give us an update, because you took the lead on that this
year. Yes,
which, by the way, was quite something for a freshman member of the Assembly to be the lead on such a important and significant piece of legislation.
Yes, thank you, and I owe a debt of gratitude for Speaker Carl Heastie for understanding that I would be able to champion this bill in the Assembly. It was a spirited debate. The person who had the bill before me was Councilmember Francisco Moya, who defended the bill ably for 7 times. It passed 7 times in the Assembly. This was the 8th year that we had passage in the Assembly. 1 year it passed twice, failed in the Senate. But so for me, it was about that American dream, right? When I immigrated here from the Dominican Republic, I was a baby. I was brought here. My parents settled in Washington Heights. I was fortunate enough that I was documented. But the stories of the undocumented children who enter this country the same way that I did are children who have been educated through our public education system. In New York State, there's a responsibility to educate students. We don't ask them what their immigration status is when they go into kindergarten in a public school in our community. But then when they get to 12th grade and they're ready to flourish and use all the materials that we've instilled in them from childhood, they're told, well, you're on your own. Figure out how you're going to make ends meet in order to pay for college. We know that student loan debt is the highest it's been, and we know the burdens that brings on communities of color. And so when you have an immigrant student who is undocumented and he comes in and he's trying to do the right thing, he's trying to go to school, what young person asks for more schoolwork? What young person says, I want to go to school? Well, these young dreamers have said that. And I think that sometimes we get wrapped up on the national debate of the DREAM Act. The state DREAM Act is an education bill. It is not an immigration bill. It does not grant citizenship. What it does is that it allows for undocumented students to have access to TAP, to have access to financial aid through the state so that they can continue to pay for their education. It also allows them to enter the 529 savings program.
Which we administer in our office.
Exactly. You're a big fan of. So that they can save for college. Yeah. And it also allows them to access scholarship. So this is the right thing to do. These students work sometimes overnight. I've had interns who were dreamers who worked overnight and came into the internship straight through just to be able to have the experiences to pay for college and work. And you know, I think it's heartbreaking that we're doing that to these young, the workforce of tomorrow. Yeah. So it makes economic sense for New York State.
Well, your passion explains why you are the lead sponsor on that bill, and you know, the governor backs it now. So we hope the Senate will do the right thing. You know, as you recall, we put out a report a couple of years ago and we updated it to show that for a very modest cost, we estimated really less than $20 million is what the financial impact would be. You'd get this great benefit because all the studies show that a person who gets a college degree is able to have a more secure work future, becomes a more productive taxpayer. You know, we estimated for really what is a modest impact as far as the TAP budget, because less than 2% of an impact. Just by getting an associate's degree, you will pay more, something like $30,000 more in taxes over a lifetime. If you get a bachelor's, more like $60,000 more in taxes. So to help these students get that college degree, become productive members of society, pay more in taxes, it more than pays for itself.
Absolutely.
So keep fighting. We hope you win on that one.
Thank you, and thank you for your report.
Oh, we hope it was helpful. We only have a couple minutes left, but I want to talk for a moment because another big issue that everybody's facing now, especially in older cities like New York and older states like New York, is that issue of infrastructure. And you've been given a role to play in that. That's a subcommittee that you chair.
Yes.
So tell us just a little bit about that.
So I am part of the Corporations and Authorities Committee. And under that committee, there's a subcommittee on infrastructure. I was recently named the chair of that subcommittee. And based upon the responsibilities of the subcommittee is basically to look at issues of infrastructure in New York State. New York State, we know that it's one of the states where the infrastructure is aging. And there are plans to invest in that infrastructure. When we look at New York City specifically, we look at what's happening at LaGuardia Airport. We look at the building of the new Tappan Zee Bridge, the Mario Cuomo Bridge. We look at what's happening all around in our communities, the bridges, the tunnels, the MTA. And the capital plan of the MTA.
Still a big issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what happens to that underground infrastructure, but also the above ground infrastructure of the MTA. And so in that capacity, I'm starting to look at now the investments that we're making and how those investments really trickle down to local communities. We all get the emails about the potholes and about the roads being uneven and the trip hazards. And so these are definitely things that we're looking at. In the bigger scheme of pictures, I think that there's a lot of money that's coming in, as you know, for infrastructure, and we need to continue to make sure that that money is being used for the advancement of our city.
Yeah. And this is another area where we really could use the help out of Washington. And infrastructure is one of the few topics that there seems to be a bipartisan interest. Unfortunately, from my perspective, what the president laid out really didn't provide much in terms of real dollars to come to the states. You mentioned very important transportation infrastructure, but you also have the environmental infrastructure. Water, drinking water is a big issue in many parts of the state. A lot of contamination of drinking water. And sewer systems, kind of things, again, we don't always think about because it's underground and, you think everything takes care of itself. So I think that's going to be a key area moving forward because the state needs to do more with our own infrastructure. We need to do more to help localities as well.
Yes.
Well, I think we're just about out of time. But you've got a lot on your agenda, and we wish you well and wish you continued success. So thank you for joining us, Assembly Member.
Thank
it's great to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
And thanks to our viewers. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to continue to be discussing New York issues with my next guest. So thank you for watching Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Represent NYC. I'm New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. And I'm very pleased to have my next guest on the show, Marty Markowitz, who served his beloved Brooklyn for 23 years as a state senator and as borough president from 2002 to 2013. He's now a vice president at the city's promotional and tourism nonprofit, NYC and Company, where he tells the world how wonderful New York City is. Marty, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
I will confess you are one of my most favorite people I've ever met in politics and in life.
Oh, no.
And when you got this position, I can't think of anybody better to be a booster for New York City. But tell us about the organization.
Sure.
How does it work? What's its
Sure.
mission? What's it all about?
Well, first off, I have to tell you that first off, we love Tom DiNapoli. I have to tell you that I'm a big fan. And so is Brooklyn, and so is New York City, and we're just very proud of the work you do.
Thank
and
you.
I mean
Thank
that.
you.
And I don't know how many folks you know I went from president to vice president, so there you go. Anyway, that's moving on in life, but actually I'm very lucky. NYC and Company is really the city's tourism and marketing destination organization, a semi-private, semi-public, I should say, which receives funding via contract with the City of New York and its own private funds from those that are advanced and flourish because of tourism and the big hotels, et cetera, et cetera. Emily Rafferty serves as the chairperson. What a dynamic lady that woman is, that's for sure. And Fred Dixon, our very good-looking, brilliant president. And of course, most folks confuse us because we look like twins, although I will admit I'm slightly shorter and slightly older.
You introduced
but
me
yes,
to him
but
once. Yeah.
we look-alikes, and along with Brian Grimaldi and Kelly Curtin, and they really have stars at NYC and Company. And what they do, day in and day out, is promoting New York City as the destination of choice for travelers domestically and, of course, aggressively internationally as well. Now, I have to tell you, I think we all grew up in a time when New York City, we never even really thought extensively of tourism because who wouldn't want to come to New York City? After all, it's either New York City or nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of us grew up with that kind of chip on our shoulder.
Yeah.
Some of us still have that, but whatever the case might be, but the truth is it's a competitive industry out there. It's competitive in terms of the traveler on leisure, deciding where they're going to go on their vacation annually, and it's competitive especially in terms of where corporations unions and others, trade associations, are going to have their conferences and conventions, which is a big piece of the business.
And a lot of cities and states have invested so much more in infrastructure in terms of facilities to,
No question.
so New York in some ways got to catch up.
Right, and I must tell you, we do have 117,000 hotel rooms and more on its way.
Yeah.
But you're right, there are many challenges. Yet New York City offers the very best in terms of facilities, in terms of restaurants and cultural organizations and Broadway and the diversity of the world, which is right here a few minutes away from each other. So there's many aggressive points. I think where New York's NYC and Company, or the last few years after the current occupant of the White House took office in January of 2017, and right off the bat communicated to the world that you're not welcome in America. NYC and Company get into a new campaign, Welcoming the World, which really was a message saying to everyone throughout the country and throughout the world, especially internationally, that New York City is open, eager for you, welcoming for you. And it really stemmed the tide. It really did.
Has that worked, Marty, though? Because there was a lot of concern about tourism going down because we depend so much on international.
Right.
Has there been an impact? And what's happened domestically in terms of U.S. travelers coming here?
Well,
what patterns are you seeing?
The 2017 definitely improved, 62.8 million visitors, of which 13.1 million were international visitors. Now, it is true there was some moderation from certain countries choosing to come to New York City. The Middle East is one example. Canada was another example. Germany, some of the European countries. That happily, towards the end of 2017, improved. And especially very strong from China and from Brazil as two countries that have significantly increased tourism to New York City. And domestically, of course, we're at all-time high. In fact, between Miami and Los Angeles, we have more combined than just about any other destination in the country. So, but the key here is that you have to, in other words, the minute you sit back and you say, New York is that new New York. So now we're into visit the true New York. True New York mean all of the things that you knew of vintage New York, but all new things that are very exciting throughout the city.
Well, and I want to pick up on that point because we have a Manhattan audience, even though you got your Brooklyn pin on.
Yes, that's okay. They're the outer borough. They have to get used to that.
But when people would often think of visiting New York, it was Manhattan sites. But now it is very different, right? Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island have destinations. How do you promote all the boroughs?
Right. I must tell you, by the way, for all the Manhattan viewers, and I love you, and I know folks call you the city, and of course, if you living here in Manhattan, you call Brooklyn the city. I get it. But the truth is that of all the 5 boroughs, only Brooklyn is the true inner city of New York City, because we're the only borough. In order to leave New York, you have to go through another borough. From every other borough, you can leave New York City directly. Only from Brooklyn do you have to go through another borough to leave New York City. So we're the inner borough, so Manhattan, sorry, they're the outer borough. But the truth of the matter is...
Brooklyn pride doesn't die.
Doesn't die. But the truth of the matter is that the tourist that comes into New York, especially significantly more the international tourists that spend more time here, and many have been to New York previously, they then begin to really understand that to get a real feel about this city, don't get me wrong, the great sights at 42nd Street, all of the Broadway, all that is a beautiful thing, and all the great sights in Manhattan, the High Line, all of these things. But they begin to understand, and they are increasingly numbers, of going and visiting the boroughs. Staten Island and its beauty of Snug Harbor and the beautiful Chinese gardens, the Japanese gardens they have there, and Queens with the ethnic diversity and all the exciting restaurants and events that they have, and certainly Brooklyn, of course, and the Bronx, Arthur Avenue, and the zoo, and so I mean, and the Yankees. If you really have to visit them, you'll forgive me. As a Brooklyn boy, I still have this about the Yankees. Had I run for mayor in one time, I would have supported the Yankees, but no passion.
No
you
passion.
understand? Purely for the tax receipts. No, I'm kidding. Right? Anyway, but so more and more, and the numbers are showing increasing tourism. No doubt about it. There are parts of Brooklyn, whether it's Williamsburg or Dumbo, where as you walk around, you hear the languages of the world. As you, right in Midtown Manhattan as well.
Can you encourage Manhattanites to go to the restaurants in Jackson Heights, to go to some of the other, the other borough? I won't say outer borough, I don't want to offend you.
The outer borough. The
side?
borough, a nice way of putting it is boroughs beyond Manhattan.
Okay.
That's okay. The outer borough, but we do have a borough-to-borough campaign where we encourage visitors, so to speak, from Queens to visit the Bronx and Staten Island to visit Queens, and Queens to visit Brooklyn or Staten Island. And that's important, and of course it depends upon, the travel is tremendous because it's a subway ride in basically to almost every place you want to go. And we very, very much encourage it. And of course we encourage in the boroughs through tourism ready efforts to prepare organizations that are involved in those kinds of attractions that would motivate whether domestic, international visitors or folks right here in New York City to come and visit. And I think that's increasing significantly, no question about it. So many organizations are gearing up and saying, okay, here is my local community, but they want to reach so many of them way beyond their local community, no doubt about it.
Yeah, you mentioned, it's a point I think to drive home, it's not just a great experience. You mentioned the issue of tax receipts.
Yes.
I mean, the impact on the economy, with 2016 numbers, I think was like $43 billion economic impact, sustaining over 380,000 jobs in the city.
Correct.
In terms of employment. And
385,000 supporting jobs, right? And 60,000 something average salaries.
Yeah.
And what a great, and by the way, more tourists, more hotels, more restaurants, more jobs, more moving up, more promotions, more opportunities. The allied and ancillary industries that depend on tourism. So it is a.
And I care about tax revenue.
No, and
close to $2 billion to the state, and
question.
over $4 billion for the New York City.
Right, no question. Which then goes funds great, and requires less demand on taxes or other means that or cutbacks that we'd have to experience. So it's really a win-win. The other good thing is by encouraging tourists to visit the boroughs, it also in some way relieves a little bit of the pressure, not pressure, but you never want to see any area overcrowded or and so it really diversifies tourism throughout our city. And really, whether it's City Island that experiences an increase down to Coney Island, which certainly has experienced a dramatic increase in tourism. It's all,
and the New York Aquarium has been doing more, right?
Sure.
Remember,
Ocean Wonders, sharks.
We did an event
sharks
there together.
coming up June 30th. June 30th.
Now
we're going to see the kind of sharks that are different than the sharks you and I have met.
Swimming in waters,
but that's going to be very exciting for kids. There's another thing too. There's that the racing in Brooklyn and Greenpoint in Red Hook. It's called. It's for those that love racing. It's called the Qatar Airways NYC E-Prix. Which is Formula E. That's July 14th and July 15th. So for those that love car racing, it's going to be a fabulous event for New York City.
Do the international tourists spend differently than domestic tourists? More.
They spend definitely a third more, 2/3 more.
Wow.
They spend longer here and they spend more, and that's very, very important. Very important. In fact, I have somewhere here how many. The credit card receipts I have it. I'm sorry.
Really?
The credit card receipts shows what that international tourist spends here. So of course the retail stores do much better because those folks are coming in and shopping a lot, which is great for our economy.
But I think emphasizing the importance of tourism to the economy is a reminder to New Yorkers that when you come across a tourist, especially international, go out of your way to be a little friendly and
Just like a
helpful,
Big
ask for
Apple greeter.
directions.
Just
Yep.
like a Big
Yep.
Apple greeter,
Yep.
which New York City is blessed to have that organization.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that we're all ambassadors for our city.
Yeah.
And a little kindness. Now, I know it's usual. I mean, I know I'm a New Yorker and a Brooklynite, so I understand our special ambiance, how we are. I know how we are, which is, it's okay. This is who we are.
Yeah.
But I think by helping a tourist, if they need directions, although today they all got the phone and
Yeah.
just walking around like this.
It's not always right. It's not always
but
right,
the truth
Bob.
is, just saying hello,
Yeah.
it means the world to them. It really does.
And it also, I think, a friendlier attitude reinforces also another big plus right now for you is the relative safety of the city, how crime has come down.
That's true.
Not true in other cities.
That's true.
So that's another important selling point.
No, it's very, very important, and they certainly emphasize that. I must tell you that NYC and Company has 16 international offices.
Oh, really?
Throughout the globe. I mean, you know, I know that we take for granted that tourists just show up, but
Right.
but it takes a lot of advertising and marketing skills and the platforms and the social media, of which I barely understand myself, but I know that as I walk around my office, they try to explain to me what they're doing, and I have to tell you, it floats, but they really know how many hits each of their advertising has, and their city relationships that they have co-promoting different cities around the world.
So the website is a good place for our viewers to go to.
NYCGO.com. It's a tremendous website for every part of this city, interactive. And I know it's considered one of the finest. And in fact, they won an award recently on how fabulous this website is. So,
wow.
But then, of course, they're very active. It's not just people touching us. We have to touch them.
Yeah.
So I know that in China, they use websites there and internet. So it's really, the truth of the matter is they're expecting that this year, 2018, that tourism will continue to go up. And of course, I'm hoping this other part, and that's conferences and conventions, because that is essential for the tourism industry. And don't forget medical tourism as well, where folks come in and choose the hospitals in the greater New York City area. And that also plays a part in the success of tourism.
We are just about out of time. I can't believe it went so fast.
Come on. I'm
And
only
we're
getting
glad
started now.
you
Come
are
on.
still doing your public service with this
love
great
it.
work.
I love
Marty,
it.
thanks.
I love it.
It's really been a pleasure to have you with us
Thank
to
you.
give all our viewers an update. And I'd like to encourage everyone to see what's going on in New York City at NYC and Company's website, nycgo.com. So we've had a great show. Welcome back. We'll have to have you come back in after the summer season. Want to thank Marty Markowitz, Brooklyn's finest, and Assemblywoman Carmen de la Rosa also for sharing her thoughts. I hope our conversations have proved helpful to you, giving you some new insight and perspective into some of the issues that are shaping New York City. I'm New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli. Thank you for watching Represent NYC on Manhattan Neighborhood Network.